Ang Intramuros sa akin ay mahalaga. Ito ay naniniwala ako, ito lang ang Old Manila na siya ay nagpalago ng Metro Manila. Ito yung prime mover ng urbanization din ng Metro Manila. Kung wala yung Intramuros, wala yung Metro Manila. Kasi dito nagsimula yung malalaking eskwelahan, malalaking building, lahat ng opisina ng gobyerno. Ito lang ang lugar na may walled city o Ciudad Morada na tinatawag. Kaya nandito yung mahalagang building, tao, dito lumago. Pero noong 1920 hanggang 1930, lumalabas na rin hanggang 1900, lumalabas na yung mayamang pamilya para magtayo ng malalaking bilya kasi masikip na rin Intramuros, mainit. Kailangan mag-expand, mga eskwelahan, lumabas sa Intramuros. Tulad na ng UST, lumabas siya noong 1927. Tapos yung mga iba pa, Ateneo de Manila, nasunog siya noong 1932. Tapos lumabas din siya. Sana magpatuloy, tuloy-tuloy na maayos sa Intramuros. Pagdating ng present generation, maayos sa Intramuros na wala nang masyadong problema. Kasi sa ngayon may mga kakagibat pa rin problema. Nandiyan pa rin mga ibang informal settler na may na-relocate na kami, yung mga istansa. Siguro dadami pa ang turista sa atin kasi mabubuksan natin yung sa gitna. Tapos yung mga pavement ayos. Tapos yung mga travel ng tao, foreigner, mapapabilis kasi marami nagpapaliwanag. Sa ngayon, dumadami na. May bike na, may e-trike, may kalesa na. Marami na nag-aano sa Intramuros kasi ngayon, nagiging na to, parang tuwing may Manila tour, laging Intramuros ang priority ng Department of Tourism, Heritage. Ako nga pala si Mr. Reynaldo Cadiz, nagtatrabaho sa Intramuros ng almost 40 years, from 1979 hanggang ngayon. Naging restoration inspector din ako sa Intramuros kasi lahat ng mga ginagawang restoration, idinaanan ko from stone cutting, tapos pagbubuhos, proper bago siya gawin, babaklasin muna namin yung mga lumang bato. Tapos papalitan namin, mga may crack na, papalitan namin ng bago. Minsan, nung early part ng documentation namin, naglalagay din kami ng mga number sa bato para maibalik namin yung structure sa dating ayos. Napaka-importante in Intramuros kasi ito yung natin eh. Sa buhay ko napakahalaga to kasi dahil sa Intramuros, nandito ako nagtrabaho 40 years, naging tanungan ako ng mga pangyayari dito na bagamat hindi ko inaabot iba, yung mga archaeology, tunnel na nahukay, mga artifacts. Tinatanong ako, mga nahukay na mass grave, halos lahat building na nirestore, kung ano ba yung mga dating opisina dito ng pre-war. Kasi nagbasa din ako ng mga libro na about sa archives namin. Tapos yung mga old photo, napakahusay ko mag-identify kasi kabisado ko yung old photo and then in new, yung pagkakaiba.
During the Marcos administration, Mrs. Marcos had been interested in the restoration of Intramuros. She led the restoration of some of the gates of Intramuros. Mrs. Marcos got the engineering divisions of the different services of the military. There were lots of objections. I called the attention of President Marcos. He asked me to draft a charter for Intramuros, which is what I did, and that is the Intramuros Administration Charter. The greatest satisfaction I had was the presence of a good team headed by Mrs. Esperanza Gatponton, and in the early days also Felix Imperial, because basically the three of us were the ones who set the initial directions of the Intramuros administration. important because it's part of our history, part of our heritage, one of the few physical evidences remaining of the Spanish period of Philippine history. I think the major development since that time was the proliferation of informal settlers. And it seems to me that the proper and humanitarian relocation of those informal settlers is critical to the future progress of Intramuros. I'm Jaime Laya, and I think the directions of the development of Intramuros embodied in the administration charter continue to be relevant.
Well, Intramuros for me is many things because my father used to work in the port area, in Bonifacio Drive in port area. So even as a small boy, I really knew Intramuros already back in the 50s. And I was very happy to have been appointed administrator in 1989. And that really involved me more with the history of Intramuros and the plans for its further development. It would be very important that we know where we came from, and I think that's the special value of Intramuros. But even in modern times, there could be or there should be, and as it's happening now, other developments here in Intramuros. I'm Jose Capistrano Jr., formerly administrator of Intramuros. Well, as what's happening now, Escuela Taller assists in the restoration of heritage structures through our training of out-of-school youth in the various arts and crafts of heritage restoration. And I think this is important to preserve our historical and heritage structures, and at the same time also reach out to other parts of the country for the same purpose.
If you're looking at Intramuros from the perspective of history, it's one place where you could actually see the history of the Philippines as it unfolded. I see that Intramuros is an area which can embody the concept of reuse in urban planning. So just think of old structures being utilized in a modern sense. I think the challenge for us in IA is how can we recreate the former ambience so that people can relive history through Intramuros. And then that's where it becomes a site where we can educate people on the version of history according to the Filipinos. So I'm Roberto Alabaro III, and currently I'm the Assistant Secretary for Tourism Development Planning. And it's fantastic to have an urban area, an old urban area, wherein the maybe in our generation we can see this transformed into a more developed society where poverty will no longer exist within the walls of Intramuros.
Intramuros for me is, I would say, the soul of our country. My name is Paulo Mercado. I'm the founder and president of the Creative Economy Council of the Philippines. This is an advocacy group that we set up about 2 years ago to promote the creative industries, both in the public and private sector. So, yung concept of creative economy essentially is taking a look at the contribution of the totality of creative industries and creative individuals to the national economy. So, and to our thrust is to get the government to recognize it as a priority strategic sector and support it with, let's say, incentives or from the private sector investments that would make it grow faster. So I wish for Intramuros in the near future to become the country's most iconic creative hub.
Ang ano ko po sa Intramuros isang saysayang lugar. Kasi dito nagkaroon ng digmaan. Yun din yung natutunan ko sa eskwelahan. Sa akin sir, ang laki po ng naitulong ng eskwela atelier kasi nung una po na hindi pa ako nakapasok dito, high school graduate lang ako, nahirapan ako maghanap ng trabaho. So nung nakita ko na mag-opening sila na kailangan nila ng trainees, so pumasok ako yun. Tapos pagka-graduate ko, binigyan nila ako ng opportunity na magtrabaho sa mga heritage site. Ako po si Christian Edward Aguirre. Bali, instructor po ako ngayon ng masonry workshop dito sa Eskwela Atelier. Ang laki ng tulong, unang-una doon sa paninirahan. Mayroon kaming matitirahan sa loob. Dito ako nakatira. Sana po mas tumibay pa ang komunidad dito sa loob.
Tira ako sa Basco Street, Intramuros, Manila. Doon ako nagkaroon ng isip. Dito ako nakita, dito ako lumaki. Ginagawa ko dito sa Eskwela Atelier o sa trabaho ko. Isa ako sa mga heritage protector, isa akong mason. Kita ko yung Eskwela Atelier na nagtitrain sila ng mga out of school ito. Kaya may kahit na high school graduate lang. pinasok ko. Tinitrain nila hanggang sa mahasa. Tapos kinukuha din nila as worker din. Ako si Edsel Paul Mauhay, tumutulong para maibalik yung ganda ng Intramuros. Para mas maibaganda yung Intramuros para sa lahat.
Eskwela Talyer, ito yung nagbigay sa akin ng pangalawang pagkakataon na ayusin lahat. Tinutulungan kami para ma-develop yung mga skills namin para magkaroon kami ng kakayahan na gumawa ng sarili rin naming pagkakakitaan. Ang natapos ko dito ay carpentry and woodworks, tsaka painting and finishing. Ako si Romel Rivera. Graduate ako ng Eskwela Talyer ng batch 7. Ma-improve siguro yung pakikipag-connecta ng mismong Intramuros administration sa community, yung mas mas mapatibay pa. Pagdadagdag pa sa mga pwedeng magamit na parte ng Intramuros. Yung trabaho ng mama ko kasi dito sa San Agustin Church, parish coordinator siya, kaya pa lang yun, hindi pa ako pinapanganak, nandun na siya. Intramuros, na sa akin to, parang mahal ko yung lugar na yun kasi dito ako pinanganak eh. Ayun na yung pinakabahay ko, hindi lang yung bahay na tinutulugan ko sa loob. Yung mismong Intramuros, siya na yung pinakabahay ko, yung mismong pader. Safe ako pag nasa loob.
For me, Intramuros is a place of history. It is a cultural and creative hub, and it brings so much pride and joy to the 5th District as well. If I could describe Intramuros in one word, it's mesmerizing because walking along or walking around, it gives you a sense of history and makes you step into a whole new world that is so different from what you see outside the walls of Intramuros. My fondest memories of Intramuros, I would say, was when I was a little girl, because I also grew up here in the 5th District, and as a little girl, I would come to Intramuros with my parents. I would tag along. I would ride the Calesa. I would go around Intramuros, Fort Santiago, and I would remember also coming to Barbaras to eat with my dad. Hi, my name is Crystal Bagatsing. I am currently the Congresswoman of the 5th District of Manila, where Intramuros is located. One of my advocacies is about culture, preserving culture. And one of the things that I also do as a congresswoman is make legislation, and I also have a constituency inside Intramuros. I think it's very important because when you say Metro Manila, there's really no place to go to for a cultural experience or for a historical experience. And there's really no other place like Intramuros. It's an original. There's nothing like it. If you want to have a feel of how it was to live during the Spanish times, this is where you go. I wish that everybody would work together to keep Intramuros the way it is, but make it better, preserve it better.
Intramuros is very important to us because of the lessons in heritage and history. Siguro, in one line, no, ng objective ng Bahay Chinoy, establish our rightful place in the Philippine sun. Bukas ito sa public noong 1999, no? Inilalarawan nito ang bahagi at ang impact ng mga Chinese Filipinos in all aspects of Philippine life. I wish that the Bahay Chinoy can be recognized in the whole Intramuros and the whole Philippine society. I wish all the visitors, the audience, regardless of race, regardless of origin, regardless of your religion, can be recognized as part of this nation and as part of this nation building and the history of the Philippines. Ako po si Teresita Angsi, founding president ng Kaisa para sa Kaunlaran at ngayon ay executive trustee ng Kaisa Heritage Foundation na nagmamanage sa Bahay Chinoy, Museum of the Chinese in Philippine Life.
For me, Intramuros is our past, present, and our future. And because of that, it is very important in our lives. We must be involved and engaged in Intramuros, and we as citizens must do everything to keep it alive, to keep it vibrant, because it is the archive of our history. It is the archive of who we are as a people. Well, I'm Olivia Limpeao. I'm the president and CEO of Distillery Limtuaco and the 5th generation master blender and distiller of the oldest distillery in the Philippines. So our company was established in 1852, and it was, our founder is Don Bonifacio Limtuaco, who came from China, Fujian, China, and he introduced to the Philippines this product called Shok Hok Tong, which eventually became the generic term for Chinese medicinal wine, Shok Tong. And so we are very much part of the history of the Philippines through our liquor making with 167 years of history and legacy that we have shared with this country. Well, Intramuros is very important because this was really the seat of governmental power and trade, culture, religion, and we're very proud to be part of Intramuros now through our museum. While our role in Intramuros is really to provide another tourist spot, another tourist spot where through our museum, tourists can learn more about our country, about our products, about our industry. And we're very proud to be given that opportunity to participate, in promoting culture through food. Well, I would really love that Intramuros would be teeming with tourists, with young people working in this place, celebrating our history and our culture and sharing it with the rest of the world. Similar to what other countries are doing. For instance, like in Tallinn, Estonia, where they have a medieval walled city. I wish our Intramuros would be not just like that, but maybe even better, so it would be really a living walled city of the past, the present, and the future.
If there's something about Manila that hasn't changed ever since, it's the lovely sunrise and sunset, as if reminding us that in all the chaos, there's still beauty to find in this place we all call home. And moving around it every day, doing the things that we have to do, we completely forget the invaluable history that it holds and the endless possibilities it can achieve. As Intramuros administration celebrates its 40th year, we also celebrate its people. As we work together, inspire each other, and teach one another of the many ways why this city is a place we will always love to call home. Standing as one so that we never forget the past that taught us how to survive, so we can move forward with a strong heart to build a future that we can all be proud of. We are in.
Attendees right now. If you have any questions, you can go to the Q&A button below the screen. So we're about to start in a few moments, less than a minute. Yeah.
John, this is the 19th episode. Right?
This is the Tim. You can start broadcasting now. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Intramuros learning sessions. So this is our 18th episode, and our topic for today is coffee heritage. But before we start, I'd like to read first some house rules. Okay. If you'd like to ask questions, you may send it to the Q&A button below the screen. If you are viewing via Zoom. If you are viewing via Facebook, you can also raise your questions in the comment section. Please note that we will do our best to accommodate all of the questions, subject to the availability of time. So we have 30 minutes for the Q&A. Also, for those who have successfully registered and viewed on Zoom, you'll be eligible to get a certificate. But first, you need to fill out a feedback form, which will be emailed to you, and the certificate will be sent to you within a week. If you are unable to attend the webinar, please let us know so we can give the slot to another registrant. So this is via Zoom. Ensure that your audio is okay, wear your reliable set of headphones, don't be shy to ask questions, and most importantly, get comfortable and enjoy. And now I'd like to call on the administrator of Intramuros, Attorney Gil Garcido, who will introduce for us today our speakers and our moderator. Administrator.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to welcome you again on the 18th episode of Intramuros Learning Session. For this weekend, we will be focusing on something that I believe most of us really miss, having a good coffee. So we'll focus on Filipino cultural heritage, on coffee heritage. We have three guests for this afternoon. I'll start off with a moderator. The moderator for today's episode will be Ruth Punzalan. Ruth is a lawyer, and she is also the policy officer for the Heritage Project. We have two members of the panel as well. The first one is Rich Watanabe. Rich is the Coffee Heritage Project Executive Director and Founder. He is also a board member of ABPA Paris and World Coffee Events National Body Representative. And the last member of today's panel will be Vito C. Hernandez. Vito is joining us from abroad. He is the Heritage Specialist of Coffee Heritage Project. He's an international postgraduate research fellow, Department of Archaeology at Flinders University. So we hope this afternoon will be fun and you will learn a lot as well of our heritage and coffee. Thank you and looking forward to this afternoon session.
Yeah. Thank you, Administrator, for the introduction. I'd like to call on our moderator to lead us in this webinar. Ruth? You're on mute.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Intramuros, for sharing with us their platform for us to discuss coffee heritage. So as you know, title of this particular webinar is a case for the conservation of coffee heritage. So just to set our expectations for today's webinar, Rich, is there something you'd like to say, like just to set the expectations of our participants today?
Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich Watanabe. I hope at the end of this webinar, something that's very close to us, Coffee Heritage Project members, we'll be able to understand a little bit more about the aspects and the importance of conserving our coffee heritage. We've always had coffees every day, every generation, in every household, that sometimes we often overlook the significance of coffee beyond consuming it as a beverage. So today we'd like to delve into and explore more aspects of the coffee than just a choice of consumption.
So going back to the title of our webinar today, this is a case for the conservation of coffee heritage. So before we go further into the topic, I think it's very important for us to define terms. So we have our heritage expert with us to explain to us, to be specific in our discussion, what coffee heritage means. So if I may ask Mr. Vito Hernandez to help us understand what coffee heritage means.
Hi, thank you, Ruth. Let's start out first with what heritage is. No? I think, judging by the attendees, most of the attendees are Filipinos. So, siguro we can start out with yung konsepto ng pamana, diba? Kung ano yung namana mo. And when you talk about heritage, a lot of people kasi think about, things that are old. And indeed, there is an aspect of time as it affects you, what you in fact have inherited or what you own. No? So if I can make this more interactive, Ruth, are you there? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'll ask you a question. Do you consider your blouse heritage?
No.
Go ahead.
It's a consumer goods. It's a shirt. It doesn't speak to like where I'm from. It's just a thing of utility.
Okay, all right. That's one way of looking at it. But this blouse of yours, how often do you wash it?
as often as I use it.
Right.
So like after I use it, I wash it. Yeah.
And why do you wash it?
So to ensure that it stays fresh and clean for every time that I want to use it.
Yes. So what if I told you, or what if we look at what we're wearing as our heritage? And in fact, it speaks about who we are, right? And
Yes.
in fact, the idea of wearing something is something that we picked up from former generations. And that's our heritage. So I hope that that was one way to simplify or to make accessible that idea of what heritage is. And then going to the part where I asked Ruth, how often do you wash it, is like asking, how often do you take care of it? And you wash it because you take care of it because you want to use it. Diba? It means something to you. You might not think very deeply, but in fact, it means something to keep yourself safe from the elements. Of course, to keep yourself clothed or in proper form, no? Because there are ideas that we pick up, diba? And that's our heritage. So going to coffee heritage, your coffee heritage is whatever it is you do with coffee is yours. Yeah? If you grow up in a family that drinks instant coffee, that's your coffee heritage, diba? And in fact, you would like to ensure that instant coffee is always available, diba? And so that's the idea of if we lose that coffee, if we don't understand where that coffee is coming from, we can't trace where it's coming from. How can we ensure that in the future we'll still have this, diba? And I think maybe that can lead up to this whole discussion on a case for conserving coffee heritage, no, whatever that heritage is for each one of the participants.
That's a very good point that you bring up, that even the fact of a thing being mundane or it being utilitarian for each of us, and everything that we use, everything that we own, we might see it as just a thing, but all of these things speak of us to a certain extent. Like it is part of our identity. It is part of us. It is an expression of us. I think that's a very vivid allegory of how we can view a coffee heritage. Um, so you already ushered in this idea of maintaining something to ensure that we can continue to use that thing. So one of the things that we work on here in the Coffee Heritage Project is sustainable practices,
Right.
in order to conserve actually our coffee heritage, because we do want to continue using coffee uh, for whatever purpose that we may need it for. So Rich.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing the roadmap for our heritage project with Vito. And we were discussing about what we are in coffee. And I always say to people that I'm not Japanese, I'm not Filipino, and I'm not Italian, and I'm not Ethiopian in coffee. When you are a heritage advocate for coffee, you have to be for that coffee that everybody prefers to consume. We also put out the Manila Coffee Festival, and that's the platform where everything coffee is presented. And then people ask, "Oh, can we join the Manila Coffee Festival?" But we're not whole beans coffee, and then we're not. I said it's okay because it's a coffee culture. It's where we celebrate different kinds of coffee, not necessarily just Barako coffee, not necessarily just Cordillera Coffee. There's so many coffees in this country alone. There's so many coffees, great, fantastic tasting coffees that never get to the market, that we never get to taste. And one of the things that the Coffee Heritage aims to undertake is for these coffees not to be lost in handing down from one generation to another, that we are able to pass them on to the next generation. And then hopefully a lot of us people drinking coffee would be able to enjoy this finally because one, it's being promoted. Two, there's access to it.
Yeah.
And then three, then that constitutes the whole conservation effort. Sustainability is a very important point when we're arguing for conservation of heritage coffees. Another important point would be the economic reasons for for coffee. It's one of the most consumed beverage in the world. So definitely that there's a lot of reasons why we should conserve our Philippine heritage coffee as a way of differentiating our coffees from the rest of the other coffees available in the world market. There's also the social and the cultural aspects. It has already evolved from just being beverage to warm you up when it's cold, or to keep you up when you have a deadline in the morning. It has evolved from that to acquiring social cues, cultural cues, and that's where the saying, Filipino saying, "Oh my God! I mean, I went to that guy's place and hindi nagpakape." So it already had acquired a far more bigger meaning than just, oh, I feel cold, like I want to warm up, so I want to have warm tea or warm juice or warm coffee. It's not as simple as that anymore. Of course, there's also tourism, which is another case in point for conserving our coffees. And these days, we're seeing a new kind of traveler, which are we call it eco travelers, where they go to places where they are able to participate in conservation or protecting the culture. It's not as simple as back then. When you come to a place, you get a guide, and then you book a hotel. These days, some travelers want to have a little bit more engagement with the community, engagement in the product, commodity. We have a spot in Sagana. It's called Coffee Heritage House, and travelers go there, and then they want to pick coffees. They want to plant coffee trees, and that's the new kind of traveler that we're seeing, which is also something that the tourism sector is getting to understand and getting to be aware. And now we have a lot of eco traveling offers around the country. So in those cases, and then for those points, those are huge reasons why there is a need for us, and which is why the Coffee Heritage Project is very significant. I keep saying preservation and conservation, and that's one thing that Vito clearly defined for us, that those two things are not the same. Am I correct, Vito?
Yes, Rich, actually. Can you hear me? Yeah? This is clear? Yeah, they're very different, obviously. Our heritage is part of our culture, and our and culture of ours is very dynamic. So, um, the other thing that we have to understand when we talk about our heritage are the artifacts involved, and the eco facts. Like for example, coffee. Coffee is we it comes from a tree. It's planted on land, and because of climate change, we can't have the same soils that we had 100 years ago. A lot of things change there, and so there is almost no way to preserve that. No? But we can conserve the totality of our coffee heritage as much as we can. No? Perhaps the traditions of planting, the traditions of roasting, the traditions of consuming. So those are the things that we could conserve or sustain in terms of use or practice throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may just add, Vito, the reason why he points out we can't preserve the environment, say climate change and the temperature of the world, is something we can't preserve. Like it's such a systematic factor that it can't be just solved by putting something. The reason why that plays a very significant role in coffee is because the quality and the taste of the coffee changes as the environment changes. So if we're going to preserve or undertake a preservation effort, it's almost impossible to do that because we're not trying to capture a fraction of time and space and then have that replicated forever. And that should be how our coffee should taste like. Say, for example, how our coffees tasted like in 1901 would be very different from 2001 or 2011 or 2021 for next year. So it's not a preservation effort. A conservation effort is merely being able to express our coffee preferences from one generation to another, and that's handed down from one generation to another. Like what Vito mentioned was heirloom or something that you inherit from previous generations of Filipino people.
So simply that coffee heritage is practically a living body. It's not calcified or
Museum piece
that we retrieve from a different social group. Like when we think about it, if we are going to preserve in that sense coffee heritage, then none of us would probably have the right to consume coffee from different regions in the Philippines because we wouldn't be consuming it correctly, like in that sense, because those traditions were not created with us in mind. But since it is moving forward in time, it's moving forward with us, it's evolving with consideration to all the factors involved in order to come up with what it is today. So
right.
it bears its history and it's looking forward to march on. And what do you think is our role in ensuring that this is conserved, that we are not just taking a snapshot and putting it in an album and then showing it to our grandchildren, that we are passing on an experience, a taste, an aroma of coffee?
Right. So for one thing, one element of coffee is that it takes a snapshot of the environment where it's grown. In coffee speak, we call it the origin. So it takes a snapshot of the origin, and it includes that in taste profile of the coffee on your cup. So if it was grown, say, beside a chemical factory, your 1 hectare coffee farm is beside a complex of chemical production. It will acquire a certain character factor of those chemicals in the air or under the water or under the soil. So if it's also in a polluted, say, um, very large populated highway and residential area, it will acquire some of those characteristics as well. But if you grow them, say, in a very pristine environment, clean water, clean air, and a lot of shade trees, a lot of birds, a lot of biodiversity. So it will take a snapshot of that. So what it means for pursuing conservation of coffee heritage is also a conservation of the environment.
Yes.
And it's what we're handing down to the next generation, a cleaner environment. There is a coffee shop in Japan, it's called Cafe Liambre. And they're offering very unique coffees because they're only offering coffees from farms that were harvested 40 years ago. And it's not the age and process that you're paying for. It's the information of that time and space and what was the earth in 1960. And they have coffees from Colombia, they have coffees from Nicaragua, and all over the world. After the war, World War II, so they started importing coffees. And then they preserved those coffees. They restored those coffees. And then you can get to taste it. So one case in point, sustainability of the environment, sustainability of the practice, gives off a lot of collateral benefits.
Yes. So we're talking here about a kind of stewardship that not only people in the farms, not only the roasters, not only your sellers, but this all goes like it's a chain.
It's for the world.
It's a chain of value. Yes.
Which is why the conservation of coffee and having to hand over coffee heritage to the next generation is really a undertaking in coming up with the best coffee that's best in the world, because that's what you want to drink, and best for the world, which is what we'd like to have as a byproduct of producing great coffee.
Yes. So like this forms, in a way, like relating to how Vito defined for us what heritage is. Our practices shape the environment, and eventually, somehow, it will reach the coffees, and that also will feed back to us. It loops back to us because it can affect how we consume our coffees. If the coffee is pretty bad, you're probably going to put a lot of additives in there, and that affects your taste also. So it always goes around. I think this is something that Vito would be very familiar with, as he is deeply embroiled in archaeology, geoarchaeology, paleo, environmental studies. Do you think, how far do you think will this chain reach Vito?
Sorry,
Yes.
that you were talking about what chain in particular?
How the environment and human habits affect one another in this.
Well,
we're talking about like sustainable practices, and we want to conserve this coffee to taste a certain way because it is good coffee after all. So, what do you think?
there we can look at it at different scales of time and space. In a sense, the world is very lucky that coffee is a very loved beverage. But at the same time, it's very loved. So a lot of people will farm it at different scales. You'll have those big coffee companies that will buy so much land and plant so much coffee there. They're going to be different kinds. As you guys at the Coffee Science Center and the Coffee Heritage Project know, there are different ways of planting, caring, taking care of coffee lands and coffee trees and coffee communities. Um, how far will it go? That really depends on how much we love or are greedy for our coffee. I
Patronize our coffee.
yeah, I mean, I have to say, the reason why we are in so much, climate disarray. There is the human induced, no, or the anthropogenic in environmental in climate change, and that's because of really our avarice for consuming a lot of things. No? And so it's entirely possible that we can create a world full of coffees, but then we lose other things that also might be necessary to the survival of humans. Just to exaggerate the situation. Yeah. So I think what is necessary really is a very critical, a very scientific study of coffee consumption, how much we consume, all that, and that's large scale. To answer your question, that really depends on us as society, how we decide to do with what we have, diba? It's something like you can buy a shirt, a blouse every day, diba? Because may pera ka naman eh, di ba? Tapon mo na lang yan, no? Or you can buy one blouse and you can take care of it by making sure that you don't wash it every day, because if you wash it every day, it's going to get worn immediately without you actually having enjoyed it, diba? So these are concepts that we understand at a very small scale. We don't realize that when we bring those concepts to other things like coffee consumption, ano siya, it makes a big impact. So yeah, that chain really depends on us as a society, diba? And we should, we should allow the people should take control of that narrative, no, not when you say the people, everybody, not just a select few that want to make so much profit from it,
Or eliminate other coffees.
Yeah, yeah.
Just drink our coffee.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I don't know if I'm being clear about that, Ruth. So
No, I think
keep me in line on this, no. But
yeah.
I mean, for the participants, uh, while we might love coffee, we have to think of the larger implications of, what coffee are we consuming? This coffee ba, what are their practices? When you say ethical, what is ethical practice in coffee farming, coffee production, coffee distribution, diba? And whatever coffee you choose is also born of your your context in society, huh? What your limitations are. I mean, it would be great if everyone could have a taste of Sagada coffee, of Bukidnon coffee, but not everyone has access to that, diba?
Yes.
We, diba, parang like here, I'm obviously not in the Philippines, but I'm in a country that, and they are very proud of their coffee heritage. But then I realized, I was telling this to Rich, at least in the city that I'm in, I can't find locally grown coffees. Sorry, I'm in Australia, so I can't find in the city where I'm at Australian grown coffee beans, and that's what I want to try. Right? Instead, I'm in a city that has so many roasters, and when you look at the coffees that they sell, it's Colombia coffee, it's Brazil coffee, it's Vietnamese coffee. Sadly, wala ngang Philippine coffee.
Soon, you think?
We're getting there. We're gonna get there.
Bilisan nyo.
Right.
So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned about how it is easy for an entity that has the capability and the resources to just dominate the whole coffee market, and and yes, that is a very tempting proposition for any company. Uh, and as well, on the other side of the coin, that's also the proposition for conserving our coffee heritage, which is the economic aspect of coffee. Uh, I just want to note to all our participants out there that coffee has never seen a dip in its demand for the last 600 years. And it's not going to go down anytime this year or next year or the next 20 years. For the last 600 years, coffee consumption of the world has been increasing consistently, year in, year out, 600 years. Right now, this year, there are about 500 billion cups of coffee that are drank by all the people in the world every year, and it's $100 billion industry. However, how to stand out from that industry where there's so many coffees, there's so many coffee cultures, there's so many coffee heritage, like say espresso is an Italian coffee heritage. They are only one of two cultures in the world that has claimed the spot in coffee. Espresso, the Italians, and Turkish for Turkey.
Yeah.
So they have a good.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to stand out apart from the brands, private brands, corporate coffee chain brands, which is why conserving our coffee heritage is a way to differentiate our coffees, Philippine coffees, from all the other brands in the world. So you have their American brands, you have their British or London coffee chains, which is well funded, well thought out, very nice marketing. They attend to a particular aspect of the coffee culture, and then they do it very, very fantastically. Which I think most of our coffee players are lacking. I mean, we don't have $250 million for marketing for coffee. But I think what we can do as as advocates for coffee heritage, the conservation of, is to have that conservation effort be the differentiator. What do you mean, and what does Philippine coffee mean when you say Barako, and when you say Sagana coffee, and when you say Lanao, those are coffee. We have Maguindao coffee, and they're terrific. I mean,
Oh yes.
so
That's my favorite.
so I know peaches don't grow in Maguindana, but that's how other coffee tastes like. They taste like nice sweet peaches.
Incidentally, actually, we have some questions coming in, and I think
Right.
this might be a time to say. I mean, we can't address them right away, like all of them right away. But this is a question that's been brought to our attention. What are the differences between Arabica Robusta, Iberica, Sencha, Civet, and Amadeus Barako? That's a lot of differentiations. I think. How do we cut this cake?
To generally differentiate them, I would say for one thing, caffeine content would be a differentiator. Robusta would possibly have generally higher caffeine than Arabica.
Oh.
But not to say that they're dangerously high and the other one is fantastically low.
Yes.
No, but there's a range of caffeine content. Some Arabicas are high,
Yes.
and some Robustas are low that they almost touch
Yes.
on the low end of high. The other thing would be, I think, well, the Excels and the Liberica would have very distinct tastes. Robusta and Arabica these days, and the way that we're farming them, the techniques, and understanding more about the crop science, they're pretty much already comparable.
Yes.
And we had that point clearly made when Bukidnon Robusta, which won this year's best coffee in the world, Vito coffee. That's 100% Robusta.
Yes.
And it went head on with all the coffees, 700 entries from all around the world, Ethiopia, Colombia, so you name it, all those big theaters of coffee. And it bested some. So it's great to see how the lines and the taste and the stereotyping of flavors
Yes.
are slowly, I think, disappearing. And I'd love to see in the future more dynamic, more surprising Robusta
Yes.
coffees coming out of the
Can we answer this question? I'm so excited to answer this question. I'm the newest, like, among us three. I think I'm the newest in the Coffee Heritage project. So this is something I learned pretty recently. So because there's like a lot of things here listed. So when you say like Arabica, Robusta, Iberica, etc., that's varietals of coffee,
Right.
primarily. Yeah. So that's the fruit, the kind of tree that the coffee actually comes from. Civet coffee is definitely like it's specific to a procedure that the coffee has to undertake.
It has to undertake the civet guts.
Yes, a digestion process. That's part of the production. So one you have a varietal, and then that's a variation in the procedure of how the coffee comes to be. And barako is a specific varietal that grows in a specific place.
Yeah, that's I think another webinar.
Yeah, I think that's another webinar waiting to happen. Hi Intramuros, but so we can go into that in detail. But I think just to address Mr. Arnold's question, thank you very much for your question. So you have varietals and you have origins. So your varietals are your Arabica, your Robusta, Liberica, and when we say, for example, Sagada, Benguet, Talinga, Maguindanao, Bukidnon, those are your origins. And of course, all of these factors, as Mr. Vito already told us earlier, all these factors and also Rich, that they all affect how the coffee turns out. That's actually the real value of coffee heritage, because like every single one of us, we have a distinct identity, and so does our coffees. I think that's
Right.
really a good analogy also that we can consider. Why should we even care about the identities of all these coffees? So
Yeah, but it's not that we don't care, but I think prior to the last 20 years, or specifically like after World War II, post-war, there was a very clear difference of Arabica and Robusta. But because of, like I said, farming techniques, processing techniques, the lines are slowly blurring, and the differences between those two are somehow disappearing. I love it now when Robustas behave like Arabicas, and Arabicas are behaving more than what they were. So it's a win-win situation. We get to enjoy more coffees that we never imagined would taste like blueberries. It tastes like Snickers bars, and for the growers, this differentiation allow them to be recognized for their efforts and possibly be known for growing a particular type of coffee that has a signature taste.
So when we think about like all these different coffees, as you mentioned earlier, caffeine content or differences in flavor. So this also goes into the functions of coffee. I think like how coffee functions with us is also a factor we have to be considered when when we identify certain different kinds of coffee. This particular coffee keeps me awake. This particular kind of coffee just makes me feel happy.
So those are biological functions. So we've covered one, the environmental argument, two, economic argument. It's a $100 billion industry. And then we have the tourism argument. People go to places where they feel they can immerse in the activity or immerse in the environment. It's a great place. It's very foraging. Great coffees come from there. Some people actually I know travel for coffee. And what you're touching on right now is more on the function of the coffee. Touches more on the social as well, social aspect of the coffee, wherein it ceases to be just something you consume for you to be burped.
Yes.
Or warm because it's cold and you need the warm drink. These days, it's part of a social cue.
Yes.
I always say, don't you always get this proposition of, hey, can we have some coffee sometimes?
Yes.
And you know you want to get to know more about one person. Or if you're trying to close a deal, sign a deal, you said, okay, let's discuss over coffee. When you're in a negotiation, before it starts, coffee gets served. In the provinces, you never are offered water. Unlike in Europe, you are offered water. But here in the Philippines, in the provinces, when you're welcome as a guest, the first thing that they get to serve you is coffee.
Yes.
So it acquires other social meanings, other social cues like you're welcome,
Yes.
or a sign of being hospitable.
Yes.
And during waits, regardless of whether you have you can afford catering or food or what, most important thing you have is coffee. Everybody wants to pay their respect, and you welcome them. Coffee is what you want.
Yes.
Also, the lack of coffee being offered also has a social meaning.
Yes.
And that would probably mean I'm slightly offended, or not welcome.
In relation to that, I actually have an anecdote from my childhood. Like I went with my father to the farms, and they served us coffee when we arrived there. They served us coffee, but the coffee had milk in it. My father couldn't drink milk with coffee. Like tea and milk do not agree. So me, I'm feeling a bit embarrassed to like have a cup with like without the coffee being consumed. I drank my cup of coffee and his cup of coffee, and they thought that I liked the coffee so much that they served me another cup of coffee, which I had to drink because I did not want to offend their hospitality.
So that there is a ceremony.
Yes.
That's a ceremony of one having to offer, and there's a person or a member of the family who is assigned that job. So I talked to Batangenians who older Batangenians. Oh yeah. I'm the guy who grinds the coffee, or my sister is the one who brews it. So there's a role to it.
Yeah.
So that's how much coffee has permeated our culture and the social cues that I don't understand and I could just imagine a world without or Philippine culture without coffee and how else are we going to express this the ceremonies and the social cues without the coffee. So when someone comes and if one of them feels welcome, okay, you want a chocolate or you want a candy. Um, uh, what do you think, Vito? Is a heritage aspect?
Oh, well, actually, no. I
You have
agree.
your own. You have your own heritage of coffee. Can you tell us more about that?
What my heritage, my coffee experience, my coffee history. Yeah, no, days before this, and for the participants, I gave to Rich a short essay that I wrote, which kind of uh, summarized my coffee experience, growing up. I remember as a young boy, our family would prepare coffee in your usual drip machine. No? Until a time when my parents already got old and siguro tinamad na. No? So that's the other thing. I mean, who sustains the people? Your traditions, your coffee traditions, your coffee practices, rituals, performances, if you will, are sustained by particular people. No? And when my parents got old and my mom got sick, instant coffee was already the easiest thing, right? And the one that brought back the tradition of drip machine and bringing in other things like like the French press, the Aeropress, the Vietnamese drip. That was me. No, that was me trying to revisit, going back to, and then re-exploring um, that part of my history. Uh, um, so yeah,
So if we lose that part of our cultural heritage of offering coffee during wakes, offering coffee when you're welcoming guests to your home, offering coffee as a way to get to know probably someone you're thinking of marrying in the future. If we lose that far, um, then then we are not the same. We can be the same family, but if one member of the family is lost, we're still family, but it's not the same family without
yeah.
the other. So I think in a larger respect, what coffee is culturally and socially is we are what we drink.
Yeah. If I may, I realized that a lot of young people here in the country that I'm in right now, they're big fans of energy drinks. Uh, and actually, there's a huge number of people I noticed that are also into instant coffee now. Insights into that. One is that, well, you realize that well, for a lot of people, the act of consuming coffee uh, will be more like a pick me up, uh, a wake up, instant human, just add coffee. Okay?
Yeah.
Diba? So at the end of the day, you realize what happens when so much changes in our landscape. We lose lands where coffee trees are being farmed, and then you know you just produce synthetic, or how do you call this, processed drinks that can give the same effect, diba? And at the end of the day, because people don't care, yun nga yun eh, you don't care enough about what you're consuming to want to.
Or we take it for granted.
You take it for granted that ang point lang naman dun is I just need a pick me up. So it can be Coke, it can be
energy drink,
another energy drink. It doesn't anymore have to be coffee. So
Right.
the consumption of coffee for many people is just that. That at the end of the day, take out the coffee part. Tell them, all right, here is cocaine that can wake you up or something like that. Okay.
but
Diba?
we're not promoting that.
Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Oo nga pala. Sorry.
No,
Diba? It's, what happens?
yes.
So, like a lot of people, they find me a little bit weird because I take my time with my coffee, And for me,
Yeah.
it's in fact more often than not, I don't drink coffee as a pick me up. I just drink coffee because I like the taste and it reminds me of a lot of things. Like just like my shared experience when my parents started making instant coffee, it totally tasted different to me than the coffee that I grew up or the drip machine. No, so I had to bring out the drip machine. Um, I had to revitalize or revive that tradition.
So unconsciously, we pick coffee, even though we have our own personal reasons for the preference. But unconsciously, uh, even thinking that as a choice is the cultural value and the coffee heritage that we inherited because it's part of the choice. Otherwise, if it's not, then it won't be in the array of choices that you want to have when you want to per cup. So
Right. I want to point out, no, because we're talking about coffee heritage. Heritage is a very political thing. It's
as
a
well,
very
so
heritage
apart
is
from
very
being
political.
environmental, social, cultural, economic, it's
It's
heritage
very,
is political.
heritage is political. What do I mean by that? Growing up, ito yung kape. Okay. Paano nila pine-prepare yung kape? Okay ka na, bata ka pa, no? My experience. So I take it in. And then all of a sudden it changes. My parents were the ones who were buying the coffee. Diba? So that's the economic part. And because they're the ones buying the coffee, they're the ones with the finances, they have the power. So they make the decisions, right? But later on, even though I wasn't yet working, tas nagbago to instant coffee because there is something that I liked. I had to make a political decision. Now, look, I'm not going to spend my baon to buy other things. I'm going to spend my baon to buy coffee. And I'm going to bring out from the cupboard, the drip machine and start using that again. That's a political decision.
So we're not talking about being a member of a liberal party or a nationalista party. That's not that kind of political. We're talking about political in the sense that you take a position or a preference on how and what coffee you consume.
Yes. So I mean, it it is it is also political in the sense where, and I'm sorry now to say this, if a big company, let's say N big company, starts buying out all the land because they want to plant all the land in the Philippines with coffee, and we allow them to, then we were just politically beaten. You know what I mean?
And that dictates or influences the way our coffee heritage will move from one generation to the next, right? Because now we're drinking. Okay.
Yes.
Also, I think if when governments sign on, say, we're signatory to market liberalization, so we're allowing the entry of Antarctica coffee, if that was something, then it also impacts on our heritage. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. I just want to. There was one question here. I don't know kung tinanggal na. Someone asked about There. Okay lang, Ruth? No?
Yes, please.
Kasi sabi dito, this is a question by Miguel Ralionza. I hope I pronounced that correctly. All right. The idea of heritage along the lines of anong panana mo, how do we address cases wherein the coffee heritage of the community is one contextualized or born out of conflict, such as what happened between the Tiboli and Tiboli Manobo and the coffee plantations of big corporations? Ano yan? That is a question that shows us how political our coffee heritage is. How do we address cases like this? The first thing I think, Miguel, no, I mean, there are many ways of looking at it. Precisely why heritage is political. I mean, I can have a say on it, pero who am I? No, am I a big stakeholder of coffee of Tiboli Manobo coffee heritage? Am I a stakeholder in that? I can say I am because I consume it all the way from Manila. And so if I enjoy that coffee so much, and I think that I should have a bigger stake in it, then I speak out. No, I speak out na I want, diba? I want to support the Tiboli Manobos. I want to in them owning their lands so that they can decide how best to sustain or to conserve their coffee, diba? Instead of I do not give my support to that big corporation who has just taken their lands because their coffees will just drown out into a blend and we won't anymore know where it comes from. So much so the day will come when there are no more nutrients in that land and because people didn't realize that that particular coffee profile came from there at na-replicate na ng some big company, wala na. You know?
Yeah.
That it also connects to the question that Ruth asked earlier. How will that affect it? So there's that political in coffee. It is very political, in fact. My decision to consume local or local beans is so that I can continue to support people wherever I am, so that they can continue to produce. Diba?
Yeah, zooming out of this particular, like, the coffee question, every decision that we make really is a way for us to define what heritage becomes later on.
Right.
We decide, like as you said, if we're all just going to stop consuming coffee and drink energy drinks, then that's who we are right now, and we dictate how we're going to move forward in the future. But like us, as people who consume coffee, as people who enjoy coffee, do we really want history to move forward, leaving coffee behind? Is that really a future that we want to live in? So I think going back to that point that saying that coffee heritage is political, it's an exercise of volition to shape the things of the future. And I don't think there are a lot of creatures in the universe that have that power to define what's gonna come next or to create the conditions to ensure that something moves forward or goes extinct. I think that's a very apt metaphor for that.
I can see a lot of questions are coming in already. So before we go to answering questions, I just want to make this emphasis that behind every coffee, and it's something we often overlook or take for granted, behind every coffee is a human life. It's the life of the farmer that he needs to earn, and he needs to function because maybe that farmer comes from a generation of farmers from that area. So there is a sense of duty for a particular human to fulfill the wishes of his family or his clan or a personal commitment he made to his great grandfather that I will continue on taking care of your coffee trees. So behind every coffee is a life. behind every coffee is a life, because that also influences whether a 5-year-old or a 9-year-old can go to school.
Yes.
Behind coffee is a life, and
And
it
lands.
hinders the health of the family of a farmer. Maybe you have a wife who is sick, maybe you have a relative who is sick, which is why conservation of coffee heritage is very important, because most of these families, they don't move places, origins, just to be able to farm Arabica or farm salsa. Or like, oh, I'm a Manoa tribe. Oh, let's go to Sagara. Oh, let's go to La Union. I want to farm that kind of coffee. We don't do that. I mean, land and terroir and coffees are handed down from one generation, and more or less they're stewards, like what Ruth mentioned. They're gatekeepers. They're the protectors of the origin, and so most often we overlook the humanity behind the coffee. And then when we say, "Oh no, yeah, I just want a cheap coffee," but that's also cheapening life. Doesn't mean that we're taking a gainful position by being able to cut our expenses. I'm not also saying that we should pay more, and like what you mentioned, Vito, about no, because I just want to be supporting this coffee, because it sustains our coffee heritage, that people find that it's a gainful activity, not just economic, but more out of pride and recognition as well. And apart from that, their the recognition they get is something more than anything that money can buy. The recognition for being able to grow heritage coffees, which is coffee of Bicol, coffee of Mindanao, coffee of Bukidnon, coffee of Benguet. So being able to conserve the coffee heritage is also being able to sustain not just culture but people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I add to that? Yeah, sorry. Um, you know, I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, yung coffee na yan, grabe ang mahal," no? And then I want to tell them, well, it's not because, like you said, the people behind the distribution of that coffee want to profit, no? Because even if you tell them na, you know what, that price or that amount that you pay, 99% of that amount goes back to the farmer. It's hard for them to believe that, no? But you also realize maybe it's really what is due the farmer if we want to respect that humanity. They have to eat, they have to survive, all that. And in fact, it's also in understanding the whole value chain. I mean, why is quality grown, harvested, processed, and distributed coffee relatively more expensive? Is it really expensive? Maybe it could be cheaper if the social and government structures support, like make the transportation easier, or if society supported the development of tools, of machinery that could make processing better, faster. So in preserving, or in conserving that heritage, also comes the development of new knowledge, new science, and the development of new technologies, no? And it would be so much better for, let's say, Philippine coffees, or whatever, to be able to have national industries that support the coffee culture, no? And we don't have that, because there's because it's not given importance. It's a good thing that there are groups like CHP. Yeah.
Vito,
Go ahead.
I think we're losing you a bit. your signal is probably fluctuating.
Oh, can you hear me?
It chops off at certain points.
Oh, okay. Sige lang.
In any case, I think we need to get to the Q&A questions. We're getting flooded. So I would like to give this some time.
Yeah. Okay. So we have many questions here. Some of them are following a similar slide. So we will address some, and then I think we'll be able to get over several in like one shot. So one, is there a Filipino?
Yes, there is a Philippine coffee, and it's not one color; it's a rainbow of colors. The beauty of Philippine coffee is that we're an archipelago, and we are situated at uh, at a certain point on the equator, the tropical zone, that the north and the south have very distinct climates,
Yes.
and each of those climates have even microclimates in them. Philippine coffees, how would I say? It's a range of flavor, and I think what we've consistently found is that it's always there. Some spice,
Yes.
very bold, and definitely not boring.
Yes. I'm not very familiar with other types of coffee. I mean, I read sparsely based. I mean, it's hard to find articles with the history of coffee, or maybe I'm not very good at finding them. But some people say that. But I read somewhere that coffee was introduced in the Philippines in the 1700s by the Spaniards. Is that is that the fact, or does that speak of like one specific type of coffee, and if all coffee in the Philippines was just introduced at that point in time? Because some people are asking us that.
Right.
Is it correct to say that it's Philippine coffee when it's not it's not endemic to us, it's not indigenous to us, it did not grow originally in the Philippines?
If you go by that argument, that where it's endemic and where it originated would be the only definition of what coffee is, then there's only Ethiopian coffee. So because almost all coffees, or there's just African coffees, because they all originated between the northeast, north central, and then the northwestern parts of Africa. But there's a definition of how it becomes our heritage. And is there a quantified measure, Vito? Is it like 75 years or 50 years? How do you define it to be as part of your heritage, a particular object like coffee? So if it was introduced last year, does it go into the definition of being okay? This is Philippine coffee. It was introduced last year.
There is no standard.
There's no standard.
At least for
practice.
But under our Philippine laws, cultural heritage laws and practices, when referring to heritage monument sites, building structures, no, if we can relate it to that, it's 50 years now. But the thing is,
there you go.
Yeah, but the other thing there is, you're talking about coffee. So what about coffee? Is it heritage? You plant it here just yesterday. It grows here. Is it Philippine coffee? It's like saying, when is a person when is a how do you call this, when a person is conceived, is that already a human being?
That's a
Diba? Diba? That's controversial. It's also the same. I would suppose it's the same thing also with when you plant coffee today and it starts to grow in the next few years. Is that already? When can we call it already a Philippine coffee tree?
But it is not a question of agronomy. It's more like a question of practice and cultural practice even. Um, because there are countries that don't grow coffee, but Italy doesn't grow any coffee.
Yes.
But coffee is such an integral part of their daily life that we don't need to be practicing agronomy of coffee. It is the practice of consuming coffee that is the heritage.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Yeah, so
let's go. Next
in
question.
relation to this question, what is the most important factor in conserving coffee heritage? So what should be most conserved?
All right.
Or what thing of it should we conserve in order to say that we are actually conserving it? Is it the brewing? Is it the origin factor? Is it cultural? Is it economic? Which part is it?
So for every culture of coffee in this country, the Batangueños have their own culture. The Cebuanos have their own culture. The Igorots have their own culture of coffee. It is not a fixed criteria of 1 to 5. It is a study into the practice and the significance of that coffee, and that dictates what needs to be conserved and how it can be conserved. So some cultures and some communities tie it into their social life,
Yeah.
their community life, and some only tie it to more or less individual family practice. It's a case to case basis. Especially in this country when we have so many languages, dialects,
Yes.
and then we have so many islands,
Yes.
that it's easy for different communities to express themselves in coffee in ways that are different from the next island.
Yes.
Look at Panay Island; they have different dialects in 2 hours differences travel time.
This question is being asked to us. I think they're similar. So, and I think there's a simple answer to it. But so talking about terroir or where coffee is grown, because we're like what probably our participants might be thinking is that it's really just a matter of specific named varieties of coffee. So is there really a best terroir for coffee? Philippine.
There are probably about hundreds and hundreds of kinds of coffees, and there are some that are still being discovered as we speak. So sometimes in areas where it is inaccessible, like in Africa, there are areas that are in civil war for the last 60 years. So when civil war were stopped, and then scientists were able to go into those areas, they find new varieties of coffee. So the question really of terroir is that coffee is not a complete study yet. So we're learning about it even up to now. There are coffees that you plant them one variety as a seedling, and then if it's not if it's grown in its not optimum environment, it will change. Say, for example, a bourbon. If it's not grown in its optimum environment, of a certain elevation, certain temperature, certain number of precipitation, cloud cover, sun exposure, it will turn into a San Ramon. So you bought that seedling as a Bourbon, thinking you'll have Bourbon in 5 years. On the seventh year, it changed into a San Ramon, which is basically called a dwarf Bourbon.
Yes.
And so you end up labeling your coffee as a Bourbon, but when you go to the crop aspects of it has mutated. And the reason why we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kinds of coffee is because coffees love to mutate. When you plant them in different areas, one particular varietal is planted in another area, it will acquire and try to adapt to that area and totally develop into a different varietal. Say Blue Mountain coffee is an adaptation of coffee from Africa planted in the Caribbean.
Yes.
So there are mutations.
So out of the 7,000, about 7,000 islands in the Philippines, but only about 2,000 of those are habitable. Those are probably the only. I mean, I wouldn't know specifically, but it might be difficult to plant coffee in like the other 5,000 islands.
That's why we're doing the Coffee Heritage Project.
We're trying to find the best for every kind of coffee, maybe in the Philippines.
And we're trying to document those kinds of coffees, the way people consume them, what meaning they have for those people, and that's what we want to hand over to the next generation for them to have their own expression of Philippine coffees in their time.
Okay. How about, this is another question from an anonymous attendee. How should traditionally roasted coffee by old indigenous peoples who grow, harvest, and roast their own coffee be graded?
Graded.
Is it yet marketable?
Well, when we talk about grading, we're talking about a system of classifying what is good and what is acceptable and what's probably not our best foot forward to sell to other countries or to other people. So that's what grading means. Really, it's just classifying the qualities of the coffee that you have. And grading is very specific to either a buying country, a consumer country, or a producing country. Like Brazil has its own grading system, and they go by the size of their perforations on their sorting machines. Kenya has its own grading, which goes by alphabet numbers, and they grade A, AA plus. So when we talk about grading, it's really how one country, either he's a consumer or a buyer, a producer country, defines what for them is valuable for coffee. And it might not necessarily be the taste.
Yes.
Because for Brazil, it's the size, regardless of the taste.
Yes.
So it's just the size because they sell mostly to roasters. And roasters would want to have uniform sized coffees because they would roast consistently and give out a consistent flavor. So there's a lot of grading systems. But the question was, so traditionally roasted coffees, how should they be graded? Then that is part of the Coffee Heritage Project efforts, is to find a Philippine grading system for indigenous practices. So yes, I would love to see a grading system for clay pot roasted coffees and steel wok roasted coffees and however traditionally roast coffees around this country is done.
Okay. All right. I think I can ask Vito this question. So, if coffee heritage is political, do we need Congress to enact laws specific to the science of coffee conservation and its protection for pamana?
Or is it already covered by conservation?
Well, I don't know if people know. I don't know if people know, but Ruth is a lawyer. She might know the law better. But there we have a cultural heritage act. No? But coffee is not specifically stated in that act. No. Do we need Congress? That depends. If you think that that your Congress represents your people, but also the fact that, like Rich said, we are a nation of different cultural communities, and so and supposedly a democratic country. So that would also depend on how each cultural community is able to push for their agenda.
Right.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we need Congress because the word was need, right?
Yeah.
No, we
of course,
don't.
there's the word want as well.
Yeah.
But I'm sure what we need is Filipino people buying local coffee.
Yes.
Is what we need, and making that a not just a source for economic gains for farmers, coffee growers, but a source of pride that the coffees are being patronized. But what Coffee Heritage Project is also doing is we're intervening in the production because we understand that there is no dignity in a charity purchase just because it's local. We just need to buy. So we still want to pursue those market principles that people are willing to pay more for more quality, and so if we want the producers to gain more, then the intervention would be to understand how to put more quality into those heritage coffees.
Yes. Just sorry, just a quick one to go back to an earlier question. What is the most important to conserve? Uh, just to shoot off from what Rich said, I think the people, give importance to the people, the coffee farmers, and ensure that they will have their lands. So give back to the farmer their lands.
Yes.
Buy local.
Yes, buy local. So, well, just my perspective here as a lawyer. Of course, like the promotion of indigenous cultures is protected. That's enshrined in the Constitution. But I think more importantly, we have to remember and for always claim that we are the sovereign. We, the people. So we dictate what direction our country is going. So if we want to conserve coffee, it's not only by the exercise of like our suffrage rights or representation rights in Congress, but also our economic power. That's also a way of dictating which way our coffee heritage is going to go.
Right.
So if we do want, I mean, want is one thing, need is another thing. We don't need congressional action, but it is most desirable, of course.
I think we need more webinars like this.
We need more webinars like this so that all of us can be integrated into this hive mind of preserving Philippine coffee heritage. But again, we as individuals, we can do so much really to help conserve coffee heritage. And I think I love that point that it's the people we want to help. It's the people we have to. I don't want to use the word conserve, but we have to maintain conditions or improve conditions to ensure that our coffee heritage will not be compromised by economic need, by poverty, because so much of who we are as Filipinos, I think what we consider to be the Filipino identity, so much of that is compromised.
Yeah, but we're seeing that. We're seeing that there's a fantastic, phenomenal response local coffee and Philippine coffee by Filipinos drinking local coffee. And I think events like this is somehow uh, instrumental in bringing that message to people. I think we have the time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, a few more, I think. So, for the other questions, we're really sorry if we can't address all of them. But if because some of them really go deep into like very specific routes in this discussion, maybe in a later webinar that we might or might not hold, we might be able to address those concerns.
Right.
But just to maybe we'll have like two or three more. So if by popular demand we can come back, then we can address like more historical or international relations situations, but because of
more focused aspects.
yeah, more focused aspects.
Of the coffee.
Okay, so we'll read a question given by Mr. Zarina Villareis. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. So ngayon po kasi, mas cheaper ang instant coffee compared sa available local coffees natin. Do you think may factor din po ito kaya challenging na i-sustain ng ilang coffee farmers ang coffee businesses nila? If so, ano po yung mga existing projects or solutions niyo po for them to sustain coffee farming thus conserving coffee heritage?
What we have right now is a situation where there is very little production of local coffee and a huge demand of consumption, local consumption for coffee, which is why there's some difficulty in getting the prices to be rationalized, so to speak. If you buy those instant coffees, and we all know that that's not just coffee in there, so it's really difficult to be as efficient as the instant coffee manufacturers, especially say if you're Vietnam Coffee, and Vietnam Coffee is state sponsored because that system in Vietnam is very different from a Philippine system, which we are more liberal in our market. But I think that the effort that we're doing is trying to encourage more people to get into the production, and so we can rationalize the prices. And that we'd like to see one day a situation where every corner in this country you can find easily brewed coffee from a local coffee farm. But for now, I think as Vito would probably agree with me, that instant coffee, even though it's not from the Philippines, even though you're getting that Vietnam coffee or Indonesian or Malaysian coffee, my sister-in-law has Malaysian coffee. But what it does is it bridges your coffee culture, and up until you're not able to purchase or have access to local coffee, that would work for now. But the effort of the Coffee Heritage Project is to have more production, get more people, and the attraction comes in having that particular work to be attractive for say the young people, which we're experiencing a migration from the farm. But how do we attract them back into the farms and produce coffee or brew coffee?
So for our last question, since there are various Philippine coffee blends, coffees, what do you think is the best way to introduce them and make them accessible to the majority? Can it be through major coffee chains, small coffee shops, or through other means?
Personally, local coffee shops would be the best way because it also helps the local businesses around it. Well, local coffee chains as well. I mean, all channels are helpful, but in order to float our economy, and much of our current economy relies on the backbone of the small medium enterprises. So I'd love to see a lot more of those copies being channeled through the SMEs. So right now the SMEs are struggling. They're really struggling at this time. And so what we'd love to call out to everybody who's participating in the webinar, please support your local coffee shops and your local coffee businesses. They really need your help right now.
So in connection with this, like, what are these other means that you can find local coffee producers, suppliers, farmers? Hopefully, towards the end of the year, if COVID would allow us, if COVID would just stop, the Manila Coffee Festival is a good opportunity to get to know your local farmers, because usually they bring in their coffees from all over the Philippines and they present them. So you can finally find the coffee that's perfect for you. So I think we are also working with Intramuros for that particular project. Unfortunately, like, we were supposed to have that in March, but because of this, we are working
because we care about everyone.
Yeah. Yes. So like right after, like, it was supposed to be held like
just a few days
before the lockdown. So please stay tuned for when that's going to be held, because we know that it's difficult to find your coffee farmers, because it's not actually very accessible, and through no fault of any of the participants in that scenario, it's just not easy. But also to add support for your local farmers and your local coffee businesses to ensure that Philippine coffee, as you thought you were purchasing, makes it to you. Try to get to know where your coffee is coming from. Just to make sure that it's not actually like what you thought you're buying Philippine coffee, actually you were getting coffee from a completely different place. So it would be good to, like, participating in this webinar, like educating yourself on where your coffees can be coming from. Not all Arabicas are from Sagada or Benguet or Baguio. They're not the exact same place. They're different places, and as we mentioned earlier, every place has a different effect on the coffee. So I think part of wanting to conserve coffee heritage is knowing what it is, and, like, in order for all of us to properly participate.
So you can also try some Philippine coffees we're presenting. So we run a roasting facility and coffee facility. It's called SGD Coffee. So if you check out our Facebook page, SGD Coffee, you will not just find SGD Coffee there, but what we've done is we've carried on some coffees directly from farmers, and from farmers who actually farm their coffees. And present them at SGD Coffee, simply because they don't have a store, they don't have a platform. So we're sharing with you some of these great, fantastic coffees. You can visit us on Facebook, SGD Coffee, and try them out. There are a lot of other groups out there, Facebook groups that offer Philippine coffees. You can check them out as well. You can call us or message us at 0917 826-9537 for orders. I repeat, the contact number is 0917 826-9537. And if you have questions about other copies that you wish to source, maybe we can help out, point you to the farmers themselves. We would be glad to help you connect directly with the farmers who grow the coffees.
Yeah, thank you very much. Vito, do you have few words before we totally wrap up?
Well, thank you to, of course, the Coffee Heritage Project, Rich, Ruth, everyone back there at the Coffee Science Center. Thank you to Rancho of Intramuros Administration and the Intramuros Administration and everyone. And buy local, drink Philippine coffee.
Buy local shirt.
I love the shirt.
Yeah, you can buy this at SGD Coffee as well. Buy local.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much to all of you for participating in this Zoom meeting. We hope that you learned a lot from it. As the resident coffee newbie in this panel, learned a lot actually from just participating in this. We hope that we can have more of these so that we can continue this conversation on the conservation of Philippine coffee heritage. We hope that you can join us. We hope that you, in your enjoyment of coffee, find your way into participating in conserving Philippine coffee heritage. So thank you, Intramuros, for sharing your platform with us. Thank you to all of you for taking an interest in this topic. And we hope that if we have a next time for this kind of discussion, that you will join us again.
Buy local.
Buy local.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Thank you so much. And for our attendees, if in case you missed this episode or if in case you are late, do not worry because shortly we're going to upload this episode of the Intramuros Learning Session in our YouTube channel. So the Intramuros administration is available in YouTube. Just key in Intramuros administration, or you can go to the link bit.ly /IAILS. So the link is on the screen. And don't forget as well to follow the Intramuros administration. We are available on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So be sure to stay tuned to our announcements because we have a lot more episodes in the coming weeks. So looking forward. And then just quick promotion. So we are now also available in Google Arts and Culture. So you can view our museum collection in Google Arts and Culture. All our artifacts, well, most of them actually, have been digitized already. So for the antique enthusiast or for those who just want to learn about Philippine heritage and Philippine antiquities, you may visit our Google Arts and Culture page. Just key in Intramuros administration. Thank you everyone for this very productive and successful webinar, and we're looking forward to future collaborations. Definitely there will be more to come in the future. So to all our attendees,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye.